Scott will answer them. That's all it is, very simple. And November 17, which is about 2 weeks from now, we are going to have a very interesting talk with Shai Friedman talking about things C# can do that you probably didn't know. So if you're interested, please join us again on November 17. And with that, I think I'm going to give the stage to Scott. Scott, take it away.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And for those of you that are new to this kind of format, basically the way it works is we have about, I think, 90 minutes ahead of us where you can ask any question you want, and I will try to answer as many questions as I can over that next 90 minutes. For those of you new to the live meeting, you'll notice there's a kind of a Q&A manager button near the top. That brings up kind of question and answer thing panel there. Fire away the questions you have, and they'll show up in front of me, and I'll try to answer kind of as many as I can. Often we end up getting 40 or 50 of them, so it might take a little while to get around to your question, but I'll try to answer as many as I can. Usually what I try to do also, just to give a little context, is I often try to group questions together. So if I see a lot on one particular topic, I'll try to do a couple of those. So if it looks like I'm skipping your question, it's not usually that I'm skipping the question. It's just the previous question, there was something related to it that I'm also trying to answer, and hopefully I'll come back and get your question as well. So with that, let's go ahead and kind of get kick-started. From a just for an introductory, from just a quick intro perspective, I think people have asked, hey, what's the next couple months or next year going to bring? I think for developers, in particular developers on the Microsoft stack, I think the next 12 months are going to be pretty exciting ones. There's a lot of great stuff coming out, and really just across the board with a lot of different things. Last month we released our first developer preview of a couple of different technologies. One of which is obviously Visual Studio 11 and .NET 4.5. These are pretty big releases that I think any Visual Studio or .NET developer is really going to love. There's a ton of new capabilities and support within it. Lots of great improvements coming with ASP.NET, new mobile capabilities, some new REST capabilities we'll be talking about shortly. A lot of improvements for building interactive apps and sites. A lot of improvements around performance and just sort of up and down the stack, data binding, both in the MVC and the web form space, kind of a lot of great improvements. Some important improvements to WPF in terms of data binding, as well as other capabilities. Some improvements to the XAML editing experience inside VS11 for both WPF and Silverlight. We're now taking the blend design surface that used to only be available in Expression Blend and now run it inside Visual Studio, which gives you kind of a richer editing experience overall. A lot of improvements for workflow, the workflow designer, a lot of improvements with WCF, coming. And just in general, from a platform perspective, a lot of great capabilities. From a tooling perspective, a lot of great editing improvements coming, a lot of overall just great IDE improvements, a lot of TFS improvements, a lot of data improvements, both with data projects as well as the next generation of Entity Framework. And then, from a language perspective, the next version of C# and VB in particular are adding a bunch of new capabilities, in particular around what we call async programming. And async is something that .NET has supported really since the beginning with .NET 1.0. And ASP.NET itself, for example, is built on top of an async pipeline and always has been. But writing async code is hard, and writing it so it actually performs well and doesn't have bugs is even harder. And so while people have taken advantage of that, it hasn't always been mainstream. In general, I actually usually caution people about taking advantage of async today, because if you do it wrong, you can actually make your app worse as opposed to better. One of the things that's great about the .NET 4.5 release and the new version of the languages is that we are actually kind of embedding async support directly into the languages. And so there's new keywords like async and await that allow you to write what looks like fairly synchronous code, but which the compiler and the runtime actually pulls apart into different async blocks that we can execute very efficiently and use much more effective thread use and avoid blocking on things like network and data access and web service access. You're going to see that both in languages, the tooling, and the editor, and then also sprinkled throughout the frameworks to take advantage of it. I think that's going to be a huge improvement in capability. We also last month then obviously shipped the first preview of Windows 8, which is kind of our next major release of our desktop and client operating system. That actually works for both obviously desktop and now new touch form factors, including ARM devices that we actually talked about last month as part of our build conference. And obviously Visual Studio and .NET support that in a really rich way. You can build Windows 8 applications, what we call kind of Metro-style applications, using a variety of different languages. You can use C# and VB with a XAML stack that feels very familiar to people that are coming from either a Silverlight or WPF background. And so you use a lot of the same controls, you use data binding, you use templating, use resources, use kind of the same core model. We showed at the build conference, you can take XAML assets, whether it's phone or say Silverlight, you can copy and paste the XAML, copy and paste the code, and with a few changes, you can often very easily get those apps to be immersive Metro-style apps that can take full advantage of the new Windows shell and run inside the Windows 8 App Store. We also then support the ability to write those applications using HTML5 and JavaScript, as well as using C++ and XAML. And so it's a pretty rich platform, lets you build some great experiences, and you can use any language for it. And the next release of Visual Studio will have great support for all of them. And if you're writing in C# or VB, you can take advantage of all the new Windows APIs, and they're exposed in a way that feels just like standard .NET APIs in terms of objects, properties, methods, and events. We also then allow you to use sort of like a subset of the full .NET framework that's specific for client apps. So you use the same IO namespace, the same collections namespace. You can use WCF, you can use XML, you can use LINQ in building those applications as well. We've deliberately scoped it so you don't, for example, see ASP.NET or server stuff when you're building client applications. You can think of it kind of as like a client profile when you're targeting Windows 8 Metro apps. So it's a very rich subset of the full framework, and it's a subset we think makes the most sense when building client UI apps, and so you can do some really cool things with it. Next month, we're going to be shipping, we're on track to ship Silverlight 5. So that's a major release also, with a bunch of new capabilities and support for it. We shipped the release candidate of it a few weeks ago, and I no longer run the Silverlight team, but I know the team's on track to ship the 5.0 release shortly. We also then last month shipped Windows Phone 7.1, also sometimes known as Mango. This is kind of a major release. It's got a Windows Phone. Definitely recommend updating it. Tons of great improvements. Now supports the 4.0 level of Silverlight and XAML. From a tooling perspective, has some great tooling improvements, both with the emulator, things like profilers, etc. We also shipped a whole bunch of stuff in the Azure space. I feel like I'm just talking about all this stuff. Last month we showed some of the original, or some new features like Service Bus v2, and some of the new capabilities that are coming to our storage APIs inside Azure. For people that know, I'm much more involved now in the Azure space than I used to be, so the last couple months have been a little quiet blogging, mostly because I'm pretty heads down working on Azure, I can't entirely say what's coming. I can say there's some really, really, really cool stuff coming soon, I think for developers, in particular .NET developers, I'm excited to be able to talk about some of those improvements soon, and I think you're going to find some really great stuff coming. Anyway, I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of stuff that is also coming out, but that was 10 minutes of me talking about new releases. The cool thing is, there's just a lot of stuff to take advantage of. I think most of the releases are very, very scenario and customer focused, and so there's just a lot of not only features, but features that really deliver the common things that we hear people ask for. The other last thing just to mention that's kind of cool is that with Visual Studio Release 11, we will support backwards compatibility of both project files as well as solution files. And so if you start building an application with VS 2010, if you open it inside VS 11, it won't actually one-way convert your project or solution file. You can edit in VS 11, save it, and then go back to VS 10 and open it up again. And that, plus all the multi-targeting support we have, I think will mean that as some of these new technologies come out, it'd be a lot easier to upgrade and take advantage of them, even in teams where half your teams are running using the new version, half the old version. You know, it's hopefully some pretty exciting times coming out. So with that, let's actually open up to some questions. And so again, if you just joined, you can use the Q&A panel, and you can post questions, and I will start answering them as fast as I can. Let's see, there's a couple of Silverlight questions. Let me see if I can filter on Silverlight and then answer a couple of those quickly to start off with. In terms of, people have asked, hey, what's going on with Animal? What's going on with Silverlight? I don't want to use HTML, as someone said. Okay. Well, in terms of kind of, as I mentioned in the kind of preamble there, Silverlight 5 is going to ship next month. It's a pretty major release, and you know, for applications where you want to web deliver it inside the browser, has a bunch of capabilities, a bunch of improvements. I think the team's done a really stellar job in terms of that release. And as I kind of also mentioned, we shipped the Windows Mango release last month, whose kind of entire application developer stack is built around XAML. And kind of a phone-specific version of Silverlight. And kind of as you saw last month as well with Windows 8, we shipped WinRT support for XAML. And so again, if you're familiar, if you come from a XAML background and you know Silverlight today, for building those types of you know, client applications that integrate within the new Windows shell that we call Metro. You know, XAML is an absolutely first-class citizen in that world, and you can take full advantage of those types of capabilities. And so, and there's other devices that we're shipping or about to ship that will take advantage of XAML and kind of our Silverlight technologies as well. In terms of kind of the improvements, you know, the big thing is in terms of, you know, hopefully you can see between the phone with Windows and with other things that we're doing. You know, if anything, we're kind of expanding the number of devices that XAML is a first-class citizen for, and with our tooling and with our overall platform investments, we're making it even better and better. We are, you know, I think it's fair to say in the last, you know, last 2 years, we focused a lot on, you know, how can we differentiate even more with XAML and go after scenarios that both from a monetization perspective for you, as well as from a user experience perspective, really kind of differentiate more than, say, other UI technologies out there. And so for, you know, in particular for phone and with the new Metro touch experience that's coming to Windows, that'll work both for desktops, laptops, and slates, you know, we've got a kind of an aesthetic and a user experience that I think is really differentiated, and also importantly integrated into a deployment and app store model that allows you to make money. And so those are kind of also two kind of investments we've made that are less technology specific, but we think ultimately kind of preserve and extend you know, the skills and the technology that you learn with XAML in kind of unique ways, and ultimately makes being a XAML developer even more valuable from a skill set perspective. And you know, we're going to continue to support Silverlight 5. And, you know, obviously for a lot of people using it for line of business scenarios where the App Store doesn't make as much sense. And, you know, you continue to see us kind of improve there as well. So that's a little bit in terms of what we're doing. So for people that are like, hey, are you moving away from XAML or you're not doing XAML? Hopefully you can see what some of the investments we've made even as recently as last month with Windows 8 and with Mango that we're continuing to invest there. And I think in terms of scenarios and capabilities, in particular, doubling down on touch, which has a hard focus on animation and kind of that type of aesthetic movement or motion, we think XAML is great for that. Morton asked the question, is code reuse across all XAML texts a big priority? Today it's pretty much impossible to reuse WPF Silverlight, WPF 7 code in XAML with WinRT. It's a good question. So in general, I think you'll see as kind of the next couple of Windows 8 betas and previews come along in the final release, you will continue to see more compatibility. There's features that aren't in Windows 8 yet across the board that will show up as part of the beta and the final release. And so to Morton's question, I do think you'll see better compatibility. We are being a little, we are trying to be careful as we introduce new platforms. And we did this both with Windows Phone 7 as well as with Windows 8, where we don't simply say we're going to, if we're building a new experience that has new paradigms, we want to be thoughtful about what we bring forward. And so, for example, with Windows Phone 7, we don't have certain controls because we don't think those make sense in a metro world. We don't support mobile dialogues, for example, because that's kind of not what we want people to kind of build apps for. We want to kind of tailor them towards the metro experience. And there are some APIs that we don't support either. And so those are things that, some of those, you'll see will actually be updated to be supported. And so some of the things around data binding and other, I think, dependency properties and things like that aren't supported in the preview, I believe. The team has said publicly that some of those features will be coming in later releases or later betas or previews. But in general, we're also trying to be thoughtful in terms of making sure that the features we do bring forward make sense. And I think the most important thing is less trying to just say copy and paste my code between a phone, a tablet, and a desktop, because if you just have one code across all three, the UI is probably not the right UI for at least two of the three devices. But instead, how do you actually enable the skill set and allow you to kind of be super proficient, use the same tools across all of them, and then where it makes sense, take code and make it portable as well. There's a few more. Jeffrey asked the question, is it true that IE10 will not support either Silverlight or WebGL? Actually, that's not true. IE10 definitely supports Silverlight. I don't believe the IE team said anything about WebGL support, though. But I need to point you at the IE team to find out for sure there. In terms of what's Microsoft's recommended approach for 3D web development, that's a good question. In general, I'd say that 3D web development is still relatively nascent. Different browsers support different standards, and there's different level of capabilities. Silverlight 5 does support, does have a 3D API in it, and so that is one approach you can use. But in general, I think probably you're going to continue to see more investment in 3D in general in the web space over the next couple of years, and it's I'm not sure it's quite. I don't think we're at a point where you can say, oh, this is the standard just yet that works everywhere. Ash asked the question, why have you left the ASP.NET team? This is a question a lot of people ask me, and it's actually a good answer. I actually haven't left the ASP.NET team. A lot of people think that I'm not working on .NET anymore, or that I'm not involved in ASP.NET. Someone sent me mail saying, I'm leaving ASP.NET because you're no longer involved, which was very flattering, a little scary, but also the good news is not true. I am actually just as involved in ASP.NET as I always have been. The team continues to work for me like they always have. Basically, what I didn't do kind of in the May-June timeframe is I did take on a bunch of work related to our Windows Azure, which is kind of our cloud platform effort. And I also kind of shifted slightly to focus more on the server side of .NET. So historically, I used to run the CLR team, as well as our web stack, as well as Silverlight WPF and our phone stack. I did not actually run WCF or workflow or data or a lot of our server or App Fabric or BizTalk or a lot of our server pieces. And so I kind of run now what's called the Windows Azure Application Platform team, which focuses a lot on Windows Azure from a cloud platform perspective, but also includes all of our server pieces of .NET as well. And so definitely continue to run ASP.NET and IIS and Visual Studio tools for doing that. I also now run workflow in WCF and App Fabric and BizTalk and a few other things. So yeah, haven't left .NET, haven't left ASP.NET. I'm as involved as I always have been. I am right now, have been in the last couple of months very busy on some new products that we're coming out with. And so that's kind of where I'm spending, right now about 20 hours a day working on. I'm going to be coming up for air hopefully soon, and you'll see kind of a lot more of me blogging about both ASP.NET as well as other technologies as soon as I get time to do it. But rest assured, in the background, I'm still as involved in ASP.NET and the planning there as I always have been. Let's see, other quick questions. I think before we get to Azure, let me see if I can. Howard asked the question, will Metro support phones? Yeah, actually, so the Metro style UI is actually what we use on Windows Phone 7 series today as well. And so if you look at a Windows Phone device, that is kind of a Metro base. Again, you can use YAML across both of them. Slightly, there's slightly different gestures. One is optimized for a couple-inch screen, and one for a larger tablet. Yeah, we share the same core Metro design guidelines across both. Let's see quickly other. Ward asked the question, what's with the insanity of Java, XML being the program model for Windows 8 and .NET going away? Again, .NET's definitely not going away. You can build Windows 8 applications using C#, VB, XAML, and .NET. And so, yeah, it's definitely not going away. I think part of the confusion that people have had is we are branding the new APIs that are coming out as part of Windows 8, WinRT, or Windows Runtime. And those are basically APIs that work across any language. And so they project into .NET languages like C# and VB, and they feel just like C# and VB APIs in that they support inheritance, you use properties, methods, and events, you use the standard data, you new them up just like you would a standard .NET object, but they're implemented in a system we call WinRT. And the way that WinRT metadata format works, it's actually the same metadata format that we use for the CLR today. But it's designed so that a JavaScript or C++ developer can also call those APIs. And you can actually call them without having to load the CLR at all. And so for .NET languages like C# and VB, you do load the CLR to run it. And you do have a subset of the .NET base class libraries available for you. But I think that's part of the confusion. And what I'd recommend is download the developer preview, fire up Visual Studio, build a XAML-based application for Metro using VB or C#. And I think you'll feel pretty comfortable with it. Some of that confusion in terms of, is the .NET going away? I think after you build kind of just build a low world to start off with, you'll find, oh wow, it actually feels just like it always has. But with more features and more capabilities and more what you can do. Let's see if there's any quick more client ones, and then we'll get to some server ones here. There's two questions around, will Windows 8 support start menu, taskbar, multiple monitors, and around kind of direct loading of applications not to the App Store. I'm gonna defer those questions to the Windows team. I think they've been pretty clear in terms of kind of where they're at in the process. Definitely encourage you to go read the Windows 8 blog. Stephen Sinofsky's been doing some great blogging on that. Probably best for them to answer there. I think they've been very transparent. We've got a developer preview out. The beta isn't there yet. There's more features coming. There's more capabilities coming. And we're really looking for your feedback and encourage that feedback. And so you'll continue to hear more and see more about additional scenarios and capabilities in the future. Okay, one last client question, and then we'll go to the server for a while. Stephen asked the question, is WinRT strictly for Metro apps? Is WinRT also available for WPF desktop applications? The WinRT APIs, which is what you use when you're building kind of Metro UI, is strictly for Metro apps right now. The desktop APIs that WPF uses, Win32 apps, WinForms apps, etc., all continue to work. But right now you can't call, for example, you can't call the WinRT APIs except when you're actually building a Metro app. That's mostly because the APIs are really tailored for kind of Metro experiences and that overall kind of experience. So let's move on to the server and cover some server capabilities and support there as well. So let me see if I can get some Azure ones. So EO asked a question, what's the developer story around moving a small MVC website on an inexpensive ISP to Azure? What's the migration cost experience? In general, I'd say you're going to see a lot more from me later this year on Azure. And so there's a bunch of new capabilities and improvements that we're making that will be coming. And I'll also kind of provide, as I start blogging about Azure, a little bit more context around where it makes sense and what it's for. In general, to your question there, like if I have a small, low-volume site that's a personal website or something like that, hey, do we have, is Azure something I want to move towards or not? In general, where Azure is certainly today, we're not really going after kind of that particular segment. Azure is kind of a cloud platform that's more focused on applications where you really need reliability, you really need scale, and you really need elasticity. Over time, I think you'll see it become more approachable, both from a experience perspective as well as from a cost perspective for very low-end scenarios as well. But in general, the main things that kind of we bring to the table today are around, if you want to have an application that let's say, a guaranteed SLA or service license agreement, where basically we guarantee your apps up 99.95% of the time during a month. We provide that, and we provide the features to do kind of hardware redundancy, storage redundancy, and kind of elastic scale out to manage it. And so if you're running a business and you're making money and you're like, hey, I want to make sure my site's never down, that it's fast, and that my business is never interrupted, then Azure makes a ton of sense, and it's definitely something that you'd want to look at. But if it's a personal site that you and 10 friends visit from time to time, and you're hosting it on a $2 shared hosting account today, Azure today is not really probably what you want to look at. It's a little bit kind of a little bit overkill, frankly, for what you need. But if you're building a site, you're going into business and you want to build a SaaS-based business, or you're offering the front end to a company where you're monetizing, or it's really important that your site is fast, scalable, and always up, then Azure I think makes a lot of sense and is something you can really take advantage of. In terms of kind of other questions people have asked here, which is Raymond asked, is Microsoft going to focus more on a particular technology when moving to Azure Cloud, Web Forms, or MVC? Again, for people that don't know Azure, stay tuned, and I'm going to be blogging a lot more about it, so I'll provide a little bit more context. But in general, with Azure, you can deploy any type of ASP.NET app to it, whether it's Web Forms or MVC. To Raymond's question, we'll support both going forward. We're not going to pick one or the other. And in fact, with .NET 4.5 and the Dev 11 release, you're seeing kind of pretty significant improvements that we're making both to the web forms as well as to the MVC stack. There's a lot of great features coming to web forms in the data space, unobtrusive JavaScript, a bunch of editing and tooling improvements, lots of improvements coming to MVC in terms of the REST space, in terms of JavaScript, and in terms of mobile development. So we'll support both, and there you can bring WCF projects, you'll be able to bring workflow projects. Ultimately our goal is you can bring any type of app to Azure and run it, and we're going to make it really easy in order to do that. Chris asked the question, Azure's great, why don't I support my application to a web role? Any chance we'll see the App Harbor model where your on-premise web project just works in the cloud? Again, it's a good question, Chris. There's a bunch of improvements that we're making to the Azure tooling experience. We shipped the first one of those last month. You'll see another update in a couple of weeks. But in general, you'll find the tooling experience for taking an existing ASP.NET project or WCF project and moving it to the cloud become a lot easier. And so, we are looking to enable it so you can take an existing project, right-click on it, add an Azure deployment project, right-click on it, publish, and then you basically pick how many machines and how much isolation you want, and we'll scale it out for you. So that is something we're looking to make easier, and you'll see, I'll blog more about that once it's available. Andre's asked the question, any plans to speed up deployment packages into Azure? The delay makes fixing simple bugs take too long. I agree with you, Andre. Deployment times in Azure is definitely something that a lot of people have complained about fairly, because it does take in the past, earlier this year it took up to 15 minutes to do a deployment. In general, you're seeing it get a lot faster with Azure. Every month we kind of shave another percentage of time down. I think what we're kind of targeting is that you can do updates in kind of the 2 minutes or less style granularity for doing new deployments in the future. Again, you'll see some tooling improvements shortly that will make that a lot better. There's a lot of back-end infrastructure improvements that we're continuing to make. One point there, when I talk about updates there, you might still say, hey, 2 minutes is a lot of time. We are looking at sort of also how do you do instantaneous updates. But in general, the Azure model, going back to the kind of scenario focus, is really around kind of deploying apps. And so when you push an update, we actually will create a new virtual machine for you. So we isolate every app into a separate physical virtual machine inside our network. We pave the machine every time you do a deployment. You never have to worry about, it worked last time, but it left some turd on the machine, and when I redeployed it, now I have a conflict with the script. So it's a very predictable format. And when we do updates, we also support the ability so that instead of taking your site down while you're doing an update, we support a model where you can actually, we support two models. One where you can say, I want 2 copies of my app running and on 2 web servers. And then basically when we do an update, we'll take one of the web servers out of rotation automatically. We'll apply the changes, bring it back into rotation, take the second machine out of rotation, and apply the changes. And so when you do a deployment, even of a very complex topology, your app never goes down, and your customers are always unaffected. And so some of that infrastructure for doing those types of deployments, the virtual machine creation, load balancer, cert management, as well as kind of rolling updates, some of that will always take a little bit of time. But in general, we are trying to make the publishing experience a lot faster and kind of a lot more agile. Let's see. So Lee asked the question, what do you recommend for generating static sites for hosting on CDN? Static hosting is by far the least cost and the most stable and scalable way to host sites, including those that use JSON, AJAX APIs for dynamic capabilities. Azure's overkill for these front ends. There's a user voice adjustment for adding support for an HTML generation project. Is that on the radar? In general, I'd say you certainly can use our CDN to do that today. You will see us kind of add those types of capabilities in the future, and in general, kind of CDN enabling sites, whether they're static sites or whether they're dynamic sites that use static resources like JavaScript and CSS and images. I actually just sent mail to someone two hours ago asking to make sure that we get a tutorial up there soon that walks through kind of step by step how to enable that with Azure. Yeah, so in general, that is something that we're going to be kind of enabling on that in the future. I don't know, and I think we will enable a pure static site. So I think specifically the request and user voice is probably related to supporting some headers with our blob storage. Yeah, I think we will enable that. In general, though, my guess is most apps going forward will be dynamic to some extent, but with things that they want to cache at a CDN level. We're also going to be optimizing that pretty heavily. And for people that don't know what a CDN is, or don't know what blob storage is, or don't know what all these terms that I'm bandying around, update domains and things like that I've mentioned, again, I'm going to be blogging a lot more about that. But they're basically pretty powerful cloud capabilities that we've added into Azure. Other cloud providers have them too, but we're kind of making them really nice and integrated inside Azure. And so for those of you who don't know what a content delivery network is, it's basically, we have 10,000 servers scattered around the world in different geographic locations. And basically you can set it up so that if you have a web app hosted on Azure or somewhere else, you can set up to your style sheets, your JavaScript files, your images, and even sometimes the HTML from an ASP.NET page are cached on these CDNs that are very close to your customers. And so if a customer in Europe is accessing a site that's hosted in the US, when you'll send a URL, get the HTML back from the US for the page, but when that page references style sheets or images or JavaScript files, instead of going all the way back across the Atlantic to retrieve them, they might be pulled directly from servers that are in Germany or Amsterdam or Norway or London. And the benefit there is for someone that's close to those locations, it's much faster and the experience is much faster. And with Azure, we basically enable you to turn on CDN hosting, you select the files you want us to host, and we just do it for you. And so that's kind of a feature of our cloud platform that we provide. And blob storage, which I also mentioned, you can think of it effectively as a virtual file system in the sky. We allow you to upload any files into it. You can control security access to them. And so if you want to put images or videos or PDFs or anything that traditionally you'd service out of the web server, you can put it into blob storage and provide a URL to your customers directly to it, and you can provide security access. And the benefit of blob storage is we support petabytes and soon exabytes of storage, so that's thousands of terabytes of storage. And you don't have to deal with load balancing across web servers. We provide all that infrastructure for you, and we provide scale out and automatic backup and redundancy. So lots of cool features. You'll hear me talk a lot more about them as I start blogging in earnest in a few more weeks. Let's see. Rob asked a quick question. Are there any transcripts of this call that will be available afterwards? Yeah, we actually will put, I think, both the transcript but also the entire live meeting available as an audio file you can download. So yeah, you'll be able to download it from the LinkedIn website in the future. Let's do a couple other Azure questions, and then we'll go on to some other topics. Michael asked a question: do applications running on Azure run in full trust mode? This is a good question in terms of full trust mode. So for people who don't know, .NET supports the ability to run what's called something medium trust or partial trust, as well as full trust. Full trust basically means you can call any Win32 API. Medium trust usually scopes the permissions of what you can do. With Azure, we support the ability to run both in full trust and medium trust. I believe by default now we run in full trust. And a key thing about Azure again is it's not a shared hosting model. We do right now isolate each customer by virtual machine, and so the benefit there is you effectively can do anything you want in that virtual machine. We provide all the deployment, scale out, and monitoring support to manage that, so you don't have to do patching, you don't have to actually write a bunch of deployment scripts. But in terms of isolation, you are fully isolated from other customers, and you can run any code within it. Let's see. So in the early days of App Fabric caching, we were looking forward to the possibility to use that independently. Is it possible within a Windows service-based app? So Greg asked that question. Yeah, you can use the App Fabric caching service or server today from any application. It's a free service that you can download for Windows, and so yeah, you can absolutely use it from within a Windows service or even a Windows client application and take advantage of that as well. Let's see, a couple other questions. Matthew asked the question, what's up with HPC as a service? It seems that the server story is moving faster than the Azure story, which seems backwards to me. So for people that don't know, HPC stands for high performance computing, and it basically allows you to take work and distribute it across a lot of machines. And so it's particularly useful for number crunching, for financial analysis, for statistical work, scientific work, etc. And we have a nice framework that allows you to run HPC workloads on Windows Server. The question Matthew asked is, hey, doesn't it seem like a great Azure or cloud platform scenario? And I think so too. And stay tuned for more detail soon. Let's see. Other questions. Fred asked the question, why can't I create a Windows Phone application using my existing skills, which are ASP.NET, C#, HTML5, instead of needing to learn Silverlight and XAML? This is the opposite of the questions that people were asking earlier. But generally, kind of, I think, to this question, it's sort of, if I want to build a web-based phone app or tablet app, what are we doing to make that easy? In general, we're allowing you to build native applications for Windows Phone and for Windows 8. And obviously for Windows Phone, you can build those with Silverlight and XAML and C#VB. And for Windows 8, as I mentioned earlier, you can build those with XAML or HTML5 using a variety of languages, including C#VB, C++, and JavaScript. And so, and those are apps that are deployed through the App Store that have a unique Metro experience and can take full advantage of the device. At the same time, though, there are a lot of different devices out there, lots of different tablets, lots of different phones. And, my sense is people are going to pick a couple of high volume or devices that they're particularly interested in and build those types of native app experience that are deployed through the App Store. And then to Fred's point, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, hey, what I want to do is I want to build a web-based app that is mobile optimized and works across all devices. And one of the big things that we're investing in with .NET 4.5, ES11, and with especially the next release of ASP.NET MVC that we're calling ASP.NET MVC 4 is mobile support. And so, yeah, you'll be able to very easily, we're shipping jQuery mobile with the next release of ASP.NET. And from a feature set perspective, you're going to see the next release of ASP.NET MVC have a bunch of server-side capabilities that allow you to build phone applications for any platform with ASP.NET in a really clean way. And I showed, if you watch my keynote at the Build conference on day 2 and Satya's keynote, one of the demos I showed was actually building an ASP.NET MVC 4 app from scratch, and I actually was showing it running on an iPhone and showing it running inside the iPhone emulator there. So I do think that's a big set of support we're going to be providing, and it'll make it a lot easier. A few more questions around Azure before we move back to a couple other topics here. Craig asked the question, are there any plans to bring the Azure Service Bus on-premise? Yeah, so people don't know, the Service Bus is a messaging platform that allows you to kind of do a variety of different things. One of which is kind of traditional queuing. So I create a message, stick it in the queue, and allows kind of for async communication. We also now support publish and subscribe scenarios with Service Bus, which allows you to send a message to what we call topic, and then you could have any number of subscribers get that same message and process it. So it's really good for kind of fan-out messaging scenarios. And we also support a synchronous relay capability, so that you could, for example, from within an Azure app running in the cloud, call back in a secure way to your on-premise or corporate environment and access the WCF service there and do that very efficiently. So Craig's asking a question, which is, hey, it'd be great if you could also just run Service Bus locally on-premise as well. That's something that we're looking at. We don't have anything to announce just yet, but I agree it would be a very cool scenario to enable. So hopefully we can talk more about that in the future. See, other quick server questions here. Coder Dennis has a question, will we ever get secondary indexes on Azure table storage? It's a good question. I don't know entirely what the roadmap plan is. The table storage service is actually built by a separate team from mine, but I will follow up with them and ask them to definitely look into that feature request of a secondary index forward. In general, I do think you'll continue to see more investments in supporting NoSQL and non-relational storage, in addition to obviously a bunch of great improvements that are coming with SQL Azure to our relational storage inside Azure as well. Bill Walter asked, is the Connect website still active, and is it the place to go to get feedback on early betas of ES 11, .NET 4.5, and Windows 8? Yep, I'm pretty sure the Connect site is still active, and definitely encourage you to continue submitting feedback through it. Let's see, Satish asked the question, is there a cheaper non-commercial subscription to Azure for Microsoft? Right now we don't directly have one. We do have a 90-day trial of Azure that's free that you can use to kind of try out the service, and you'll see some more improvements coming with that shortly. We're also, you can also take advantage of MSDN hours, and so if you're an MSDN customer, you actually do get some Azure hours automatically included as part of your MSDN subscription. Very few people know about that. Frankly, we haven't made it super easy to figure out how to apply those hours. One of the things that my team's working on right now is making that a lot easier. And so once they start blogging, you'll see if you're an MSDN customer or a BizTalk customer or BizSpark customer, you'll find it'll be very easy to kind of apply and use those hours within Azure. So more details on that coming soon. Stephen McCormick asked the question, WebSockets, quick discussion. So in other words, can you talk about WebSockets? In general, WebSockets are pretty cool. People don't know, it's kind of a new standard that's kind of emerging. A lot of browsers and devices now support them. And it basically allows you to kind of do sort of like socket-like programming, but over open protocols in an open way that support going through firewalls and things like that, where a lot of companies today block sockets. The next version of IE supports WebSockets, so IE 10 supports WebSockets. On the server side, we're adding a bunch of support with IS 8 and with the next release of ASP.NET, ASP.NET 4, and WCF to support WebSockets as well. And so you'll absolutely be able to expose WebSocket endpoints from any of your .NET server apps and easily support and scale those types of scenarios. We're also supporting a WebSockets API in general for .NET, so that even if you're a command line console app or WPF app, you'll be able to actually call WebSocket endpoints as well and use them from within your code. And you'll also be able to call WebSockets from within Metro-style client applications as well. See, other quick server questions. Ricardo asked the question, are there plans to include better ways to handle static lists with the entity framework? For example, statuses. It'd be cool if you could tell you have to treat certain entities as static lists. I think what you might be referring to also is kind of, in general, enum support. So that if you wanted to have like an enum with a couple of static flags, can you support that with the entity framework? I need to follow up. I think enum support is planned for the next release of Entity Framework, but I'm not 100% sure. I can forward that suggestion along to the team and make sure they look at that. But I know enum supports something in the past I've talked to them about, and I definitely agree that we should support that in the future. So I had to ask the question, why do we have .NET 1, 2, 3, 4, and .NET 1, 2, 3, and 4, while in Java they still have version 1? They're now at version 1.7 instead. Well, I mean, the cheesy answer is we're moving faster. No, but I think from a versioning perspective, we found in general dot releases or are often a little bit confusing to people. It's harder to understand what's the difference between 1.2 and 1.3 or 1.3.1 or 1.3.5 than sometimes having just sort of simple version numbers. And so in general, we've tried to go with a model, and I wouldn't say our versioning naming scheme has always been perfect by any stretch, but we've tried to go to a model where when there's a major release, we do rev the major version number. And instead of having sort of 0.11 releases, kind of more minor or interim releases, we tend to add like a 0.5 version number as part of that. And in general, we're kind of alternating between so we had 4, and then we go to 4.5. We had 3, then we go 3.5, and go with that. So each vendor, each community kind of goes to a slightly different version number. So Brian asked the question, have we seen it all from the ASP.NET platform? And do you think it's time to shift our focus to new technologies? So what do you suggest the development community industry focus on? Well, in general, I'd say I definitely don't think you've seen it all from the ASP.NET platform. I think you're going to see, I'm pretty jazzed with the next release of ASP.NET that's coming out, especially over the next 6 months as we start talking about all the new features. I think ASP.NET is going to be both as interesting as ever, but also the number of scenarios that will enable that are new are really significant. And it sounds trite to say, but I think the web is going to be big. And so I do think there's a lot of demand for those types of features. But in general, just with a new release in terms of from a capability perspective, forget productivity, but in terms of what you can do with async support, what you can do with WebSockets, what you can do with the new mobile capabilities that are coming out, what you can do with some of the new JavaScript and REST API support on the server we're going to be enabling, and what you can do with things like jQuery Mobile, Knockout, and jQuery in general on the client side. Purely from an experience perspective, the apps that you build will be much, much better. At the same time, we're also investing really heavily in productivity and just making things easier and faster. But from a pure capability perspective, I think the apps that you build with the generation of ASP.NET that's going to be coming out over the next 6 to 9 months will be substantially better from an end-user experience and in terms of feature set perspective than anything we've done before. And I think it's going to be a massive step forward. So I don't think it's I definitely don't think there's a need to move away. Some of the stuff will shift in the sense of I do think you'll see more focus on using client-side script and calling back to get data from ASP.NET as opposed to doing pure server-side rendering. And obviously when you have WebSockets, some of the kind of real-time notification and communication stuff works very differently than long polling today. It will continue to evolve in terms of the model. But in terms of having a core ASP.NET stack that's server, I think it's just as important. Where I do think you're going to see, in terms of kind of, when you talk about, hey, where should we be looking as developers with technologies and focus on going forward, in addition to kind of building those types of apps on the core web technology, I think you'll also see a big focus on cloud and cloud-based computing, not because it's some buzzword, but in terms of the types of apps you'll be able to build with it are going to be much richer. And I think from a developer perspective, whether you're working for a small company, a big company, or you're just like, hey, I want to go build my own company, or I want to get into the world where I'm building my own solutions for others, and I want to build a business around it, the cloud, I think, will be fundamentally transformative in terms of being able to do that. The number of customers I talk to, even from very large enterprises that say, the time it takes me from the point I know I need a new virtual machine or I need a new server to deploy my app to getting it takes weeks. Or they'll say even for a VM, it might take me a week for my IT staff to give me the virtual machine I asked for. Or if I want to, get a new version of SQL Server, I need to spend months convincing the powers that be to enable it. In a cloud world where some of those services are provided for you, you no longer have to buy a big upfront expense. You no longer have to wait for someone to deploy something. You can get 1,000 VMs in minutes if you needed to, and you can send down those 1,000 VMs in seconds if you wanted to as well. And so once you can start doing that, then even in a large enterprise that might have unlimited resources, you're going to find just time to market as a developer, the types of things you can do, is going to be pretty dramatic. And so I'll blog more about that, but I'm pretty bullish on that. And .NET and ASP.NET in particular are pretty core to that vision with Azure, and you're going to see a bunch of new capabilities, cloud-specific, that'll come out as well for that. Let's see. Do a couple more server and then we'll move on. Alex with the question, what about deploying multi-tenant apps on Azure where each tenant is small but there's a lot of them? Is this a sweet spot today? I'm not sure I'd say we have a sweet spot today for that. We certainly have support for that. We often call that kind of SaaS-based solutions or software as a service-based solution. That's something we're investing in a lot more going forward. And you'll hear some announcements soon around how we're going to make that easier. And so you can certainly build those types of SaaS solutions with Azure. And the SaaS in general is definitely a sweet spot. There's still some more multi-tenant features that we're going to be adding in order to make all those kind of scenarios you mentioned easy. But in general, I'd say SaaS is a sweet spot we're investing very heavily in. And Azure is a good foundation for that today. Andres asked the question, if I already have an MVC site and plan on creating a REST API, should I stick with MVC or should I use the new Wcf Web API? And someone else asked the question earlier about the Web API. I think Gerard asked the question, can you quickly discuss the future of the Wcf Web API in both Azure and ASP.NET stacks? It's a good question. I mean, in general, obviously REST is a pretty popular topic right now. And if you're exposing a service on the web, or frankly even just internally, where you don't need, especially on the web, but or to a device, or sometimes between between different teams internally, REST is something that's very interesting to look at because it's simple, it works across device, and the simplicity of it makes it really easy to kind of adapt to a lot of scenarios. And we've been working on a project called the Wcf Web API project for about a year now, where we're looking to try to make it really easy for you to build not just REST, but more generally kind of any kind of web API format, meaning it's HTTP based, it's very clean, it takes full advantage of HTTP, and it might return XML, it might return JSON, it might return any custom data format, and you want to really just have it be a clean API that, is, if you want to build a Facebook API, you can do it with it. If you wanted to build a corporate API, you could do it with it. You could build a Twitter API with it, you could do it with it. And you can both expose APIs and consume them. And so this WCF Web API framework is really cool. We've got a lot of great feedback on it. One of the things that kind of, as I mentioned earlier this summer, I kind of took on a couple of different teams that I didn't used to manage, one of which was the WCF team, including the Web API team. And one of the things we have actually done over the last couple of months is use that as an opportunity to say, okay, how do we get more integrated as part of our overall story, so that we don't have multiple ways of doing everything, which we sometimes do. And if you have a really cool API here, how can you use it there as well? And so one of the things that we've done that we'll be blogging more details about has been working to take the WCF Web API and support even deeper integration of it within ASP.NET. And so you can use, dependency injection we have in MVC. You can use custom filters we support, and you can use a lot of the great features we have in MVC, while at the same time having the same kind of core Web API, WCF Web API piece that everyone loves. and take full advantage of that as well. That should hopefully be a win-win for everyone. And again, we'll be providing more details about that in the future. So, if you're building on the Web API today, there's a great path forward. It will continue to run both inside a web server, like it does today, as well as outside a web server. So if you don't want to have IaaS or ASP.NET, you can also sort of self-host it. But you also see some nicer integration within ASP.NET as well. So the question of, hey, do I build it with MVC or Web API? Logically, going forward, it'll feel like just one framework that you use, and so it's not actually MVC or Web API. You can build a Web API inside an MVC app really cleanly, and it'll feel just as integrated as other MVC features. But at the same time, if you're starting already on the Web API, know that there'll be a few minor API tweaks, but in general, we're definitely taking that forward, and we think that's a really important part of our stack. Other questions? We can do a couple of non-Azure questions, and I'll come back to more Azure questions there in the future. Gene asked a question, do you have any new tools, features, or recommendations to address building single-page interface apps, something you might piece together today with a combination of JS, jQuery, Knockout, jQuery templates? It's a good question. In general, the technologies you mentioned there, specifically jQuery, Knockout, jQuery Mobile, and some of the jQuery templating or JS View render support are definitely probably what I'd point you at. And then I'd also point you at things like Web API and MVC and ASP.NET on the back end for building those solutions. I actually, funnily enough, have a review with the team, I think Monday or Tuesday, specifically for a couple of hours to drill into our single-page application development story that we're coming out with as part of MVC 4 and .NET 4.5. And so that's definitely something we're investing in, and I think we'll have a great story for that. But in general, the technologies you mentioned will very likely be the technologies we build on top of. The one you didn't mention that I'd also point you at would be jQuery Mobile, which has a really nice single-page story as well. And kind of our goal is to make it, we'll probably have a project template. You can say file new single-page application inside the ASP.NET template folder and get kind of an end-to-end experience as part of that. Let's see, other questions. Tommy asked a question, what's coming in terms of HTML5 support? Well, there's HTML5 that browsers support, and so we point you at the IE blog, probably to learn more about the client-side capabilities of HTML5 that IE is enabling. In terms of tooling and server-side support, the new version of Visual Studio has much richer HTML editing support, so it supports full HTML5 dialects, both inside the HTML editor as well as the CSS editor and the JavaScript editor. On the CSS side, we even support vendor-specific prefixes. So if you use the -moz or the -ms or the -webkit prefix, we provide full intelligence and validation for that as well. We're supporting inside the new VS11 a DOM Explorer as well as an interactive script console directly inside Visual Studio. And so when you run an application, you can actually, like you can with Firebug today inside the browser, you can also integrate that now within our server-side debugging support as well. There's a pretty cool feature that's coming as part of the web designer in Visual Studio for ASP.NET projects that we call, I think, the Web Page Inspector. But it basically, think of it like Firebug or the IE dev tools, but where when you highlight an element in the browser, we'll actually not only tell you client-side information, but we'll actually map it to the server-side code inside, for example, like an MVC View template that actually generated that markup. And it ends up being super powerful. And so you'll see more details around that. So in general, lots of improvements coming with HTML5 from a tooling perspective. On the runtime perspective, I mentioned WebSocket support that's coming to ASP.NET. A lot of Web API support and support for server-side JavaScript being called, JavaScript in the client calling the server. We're also doing things like the next version of Web Forms supports unobtrusive JavaScript for things like validation and things like that. We're doing bundling and minification of style sheets and JavaScript files. So lots of improvements in general there. Couple more Silverlight questions. Let me quickly blow through. People that joined late, I answered a whole bunch of Silverlight questions at the very beginning of the talk, so you might want to go back after the talk's published, and you'll get a couple answers there. David asked a question, will Silverlight 5 be backwards compatible with older runtimes? So older versions of Silverlight, the answer is yes. It will be backwards compatible. Danny asked, what's the future of Silverlight and WCF? I mentioned Silverlight 5 is going to ship next month. And WPF, there's a bunch of improvements coming with WPF 4.5 that will ship as part of .NET 4.5. In particular, some nice improvements around data binding and other parts of the framework. Morton asked question, any plans for bringing unmanaged code like C++ code to Windows Phone? We need it for a couple of scenarios. We don't right now broadly support it, but C++, so you can't just download an SDK. You can apply, there is actually a private C++ SDK for Windows Phone that you can get, and so for some scenarios, if you talk to the Windows Phone team, they enable it for a small subset of partners. The main reason we don't more broadly and make it available is a malformed C++ app on the phone can actually crash the phone, and so we're pretty careful in terms of what we support there. Let's see, other things. People ask questions sort of, hey, where do you see .NET going in the next 5 years? Kind of more broader questions in terms of, hey, where are we going to be? Somebody asked a question, was when are you replacing .NET? No. In general, I say, .NET, I think we have a pretty solid foundation with .NET. The funny thing is every year someone at some point stops and says, is there any more you can add, or are we done? We got everything finished. And usually about 2 minutes later we realize, oh my God, there's so much stuff we haven't done yet, and it's still a lot more capabilities, a lot more improvements we want to do. And in general, I'd say with .NET over the next 5 years, I think you're going to continue to see those types of improvements. Every version of the languages that we've come out with have really kind of taken programming to the next level. You think about .NET 1, obviously, with the introduction of C# and the basics there, and VB support for .NET was kind of foundational. But .NET 2 had generics, which was kind of fairly transformational. With .NET 3.5, we added LINQ and all the language features that came along with that. With .NET 4, we've added things like dynamic and a bunch of the features there. And I think with .NET 4.5, you look at async, and I think async will be as transformational as LINQ was from a language perspective, and really open up just a ton of new possibilities. And in this world of, I want to be connected everywhere, I want instant fast latency, I want to be able to build an app that's going to scale to 1 million concurrent users, that async support is going to be critical. And likewise, I think on the framework side, as you look at ASP.NET Evolve, you look at MVC Evolve, you look at our client frameworks Evolve, you look at data evolve. I think they've evolved kind of pretty nicely. I don't think we're done. I think there's a lot more features we need and a lot more refinement we need. And you'll see a lot more of that over the next few years. I do think on the cloud front, I'm really bullish in terms of Azure being kind of the next big thing for .NET. And even if you're not a server-side developer or you're not building web apps, the cloud is going to be, transformational for how you work with data. If you're building a client app, even if it's with JavaScript or it's with iOS or it's an Android app, you need to get access to data. You're going to want to take advantage of things like messaging, notifications, identity, data, and storage. And being able to use .NET on the back end to support that is going to be pretty critical. And I think from a developer perspective, the number of apps that you'll build and the value you can provide, I think Azure and the cloud is going to be huge for that. So I'm pretty excited about the next 5 years. Let's see, other things. Speaking of cloud, Sylvia asked, can you comment on AWS versus Azure costs, features? What about Hadoop, MapReduce on Azure, and kind of big data support, I guess, in general? In terms of AWS versus Azure, they're both obviously cloud platforms, so AWS is Amazon Web Services. And so there's a number of kind of big cloud vendors out there. In general, in terms of the approach we've taken with Azure, has been to focus less on pure infrastructure hosting and more on app development. And so we kind of support this kind of platform as a service model that we think really drives down costs and really enables much better scalability. Now, obviously, we had a lot of success with that. We've got customers that manage tens of thousands of nodes inside or servers inside Azure and store petabytes of data. I think that provides a really powerful model. Obviously, infrastructure hosting is also really popular and it's been very successful for them as well. And so, in general, I'd say watch the next 6 to 12 months, and you're going to see a lot of capabilities come to Azure, and I feel pretty good in terms of from a feature set and differentiation perspective how we'll do. We're also continuing to drive down costs, and so from a license cost perspective and from an overall usage cost perspective, I think you'll see us be very competitive as well. You asked about Hadoop and MapReduce. For people that don't know, about 2 weeks ago we announced that we're bringing, I mentioned platform as a service and kind of with Azure. It's kind of a tenet we've taken. By platform as a service, think of it as I don't have to install something inside a virtual machine and patch it and manage it myself. I can say, give me 100 gigabytes or 50 gigabytes of SQL Azure storage or relational database storage, and we'll basically do the replication or the clustering, the backup, and scale-out management and patching for you. And it's never down. It has high availability, and you just kind of program to SQL as opposed to having to be a DBA and manage it yourself. And we think that has the benefit. One of the services we announced 2 weeks ago was a managed Hadoop service. So, for example, if you want to store gigabytes or terabytes or petabytes of storage with us, you can. And it could be log files, it can be XML files, it could be PDF files, it could be your own binary files, it could be anything. And it can be relational data inside a database as well. And with our Hadoop service, you can basically submit a MapReduce job. You can write it in C# or VB. You can also write it in Java or JavaScript. And we'll basically, with MapReduce, split up that work across any number of servers you want. So you can say, run this job across 1,000 machines in parallel, and we'll take the data, split it up across 1,000 machines, each process parts of the data, and then basically reduce it and combine it and give you the answer. And the benefit there is you can do super fast data mining and data analysis in a very cost-effective way. So that'll be a service going forward with Azure, that we provide. And, in general, I'd say also from an openness perspective, one of the things I'm trying to bring to Azure, and you'll see more of in the months ahead, is where there are other technologies out there that already do good things. And so Hadoop, for example, has a really vibrant ecosystem already out there. How do we not build our own MapReduce infrastructure, but actually embrace the community that already exists and have that run well on top of Azure? And so you'll see us do this not just in the big data space, but in a variety of different spaces where we're going to be kind of embracing other technology, making it run ideally best on Azure, and then also adding unique value around it and on top of it, and so we light it up even more. So, for example, with Hadoop, you can run MapReduce jobs just like you can on other cloud providers, but you'll also be able to point our business intelligence tools with SQL. You can point Excel in our Power Pivot viewer at it, and you can get really rich visualization on top of that MapReduce infrastructure as well, and you'll see some really great tooling around creating MapReduce jobs. And so the great thing is it's still vanilla Hadoop, and it's 100% compatible with Hadoop, but we manage it for you, so the TCO costs are much lower, it's easier to set up, and there's a bunch of unique features that you can take advantage of with our running service. So, you'll see more of those types of things in the future. Oh boy, we got 13 minutes left, and questions keep coming in. Question was, hey, this is the next version of C# language. Are we going to support kind of a REPL feature? So in other words, can you support kind of an interactive shell with C# and VB? like you can with a dynamic language like, say, Python or Ruby or JavaScript, where you can sort of type and see immediate interaction feedback. We do actually support a REPL shell with F# today inside Visual Studio, so we do have some of those with .NET languages. One of the things that we are doing, though, that we announced last week, we're pretty excited about, is something we call Roslyn, or Project Roslyn. That won't be in VS11, but it'll be in the next release of Visual Studio. And it's basically, as I mentioned earlier, we keep improving our languages. Async is the big thing in .NET 4.5. Roslyn will be the big thing in the next release. And it basically provides a bunch of language services so that you can do really, really interesting language transformation work. And from a tooling perspective, you always have access, if you're an extension or plug-in, to effectively the code tree and semantic understanding that the compiler provides. So we basically have now a compiler API you can use in real time. And one of the benefits, one of the features that provides you is a REPL window. And so you can go to the Visual Studio blog today, learn more about it. And so, yes, definitely a REPL window is coming in the future with that. Brian Hall asked a question, do you see an easier way to configure the Azure roles in a more graphical way instead of programmatically doing it? For example, installing applications or tweaking IAS. Basically, this is kind of pointing to, hey, with Azure today, like two things. One is, the nice thing about Azure is that everything is programmable. So we've kind of taken the assumption with Azure, which is automate as much as possible. And so you can, for example, tweak and increase and decrease the number of VMs and roles you're running by sending a REST call to Azure, and we'll do it. We also have an admin tool. The admin tool is lets you do a lot of stuff, but it's not the easiest thing to use. So I'd say from a usability perspective, it takes a little while to understand, and we don't expose everything directly through the admin tool. And so that's something that we're investing pretty heavily in, and so you'll see a lot more focus on that in the months ahead. And so you'll see a much richer graphical tool for managing Azure and for administering it. At the same time, you're going to continue to see a lot of investment in the API for doing configuration of Azure, as well as providing full PowerShell support so you can script and automate everything. Stephen asked a question, will Azure bring economies to businesses like Rackspace Cloud sites where we can margin hosting costs? This is the main driver for the growth with Rackspace. Yeah, definitely you'll see with Azure a lot of focus around economics and around scaling costs. And so in general, stay tuned there. You'll see a lot more details around that in the months ahead. But in general, I think you'll see let's have a very competitive pricing and scaling story there. Robin asked the question, do you see a place for Roslyn compilers of service in ASP.NET, MVC, or the Azure space in the future? Absolutely. Roslyn is going to give us, this compiler as a service for VB or C#. It's going to give us, at a very basic level, an infinitely richer editing experience inside Visual Studio for code, and really let us take writing code to the next level. Dave asked a question, do you ever see Microsoft supporting a true dynamic language on .NET, say D#? I don't think we have any direct D# plans right now. We do support Iron Ruby and Iron Python, which are open source languages for Python and Ruby on top of .NET. I do think you'll see us continue to kind of integrate dynamic languages with .NET, both in terms of running, but also, I think, even more commonly, how do we enable great interop? I think in the past we've sometimes focused on, hey, to be a true language, I need to be able to inherit, and I need to be able to use every .NET API. I think there's also going to be a lot of scenarios where for some bits of my app I want to use JavaScript, some bits of my app I want to use C# or VB. How do I make it easy to exchange data and to work between them, as opposed to necessarily saying create a base class in JavaScript and subclass it in C#. So I think you'll continue to see some support there in that line. Craig asked a question, will Silverlight 5 support the new async await functionality or work with the async CTP? I don't believe next month's release will support async or await because those features aren't available yet, but I think with Dev 11 or VS 11 when it comes out, I believe you'll be able to use those keywords with Silverlight apps. Jason asked a question, is there a planned release date for the Wcf Web Api? I don't think we have one officially public right now. We do know it'll be part of .NET 4.5 or ship in that time frame. And it'll likely also be packaged and shipped with MVC4 as well. And that will work down level on VS 2010 and .NET 4 installations as well. Alvin asked a question, will WCF 4.5 Designer support the XAML binding debugging like Silverlight 5 has? It's a good question. I don't know the current status on that, I'm afraid. I wish it would because it's a really cool feature, but I don't 100% know for sure. Peter asked a question, will VS 2011 continue support for front page extensions? Yes, I believe so. I don't believe we're turning anything off in terms of deployment or support there. Dave Benton asked, is MongoDB support in Azure something you're thinking about? In general, yes. We are looking pretty hard at enabling NoSQL in general. And so we will have a great set of NoSQL solutions on top of Azure. And yeah, we would love to make MongoDB, and we are working with the MongoDB community to make Mongo specifically work well in Azure as well as other NoSQL solutions as well. Other questions? Dave Ward asked the question, any chance we'll see more first-class support for server-side JavaScript working with ASP.NET similar to Win8 and WinJS? In general, yeah, you're going to see a lot more support for JavaScript with ASP.NET, in particular calling server-side code from JavaScript. In terms of enabling server-side JavaScript to run, that's something we're looking at directly with ASP.NET. We're also looking at how we support things like Node.js and frameworks like that, and ways that you can have kind of hybrid apps that have a bit of both. And so, you know, there are things like that we're looking at down the road. Let's see. Eric asked the question, the web deploy tool allows me to package deploy apps to multiple environments. Can I build ones and deploy to different environments using different parameters, like different connection strings and things like that? The answer is yes. Send me an email, and I can also, it's skygu@microsoft.com, and I can hook you up with someone who can walk you through how to do that. Brian asked a question, Brian Madsen asked a question, does or will Windows Azure support a hybrid setup with Windows HPC server in a private cloud and then using Windows Azure to kind of do burst capacity where it's required? Short answer is yes. We have more details coming on that soon. Josh asked a question, are there plans to bring new technologies like .NET 4 and MVC to SharePoint, etc.? Yeah, we're actually working pretty closely with the SharePoint team. Nothing to announce right now, but that's definitely feedback that we've heard, and yeah, we want to make sure that you can build some great SharePoint solutions using some of our latest generation of capabilities. Ron asked a question, will it be possible to develop Windows apps using C++ and Windows 8, or will that be done with a managed environment in C++? Yeah, I mean, in general, everything that works today continues to work with Windows 8. So if you got an MFC app or an ATL app from 12, 15 years ago, it'll continue to run on Windows 8 using the traditional desktop shell. You'll also be able to build Metro-style applications using C++. And we support a nice XAML programming model. It's the same XAML programming model we support with C# and VB as well. Other ones here. Robin asked the question, where can we report Azure bugs? I put some tools, errors in Connect, but there was no response to them. Feel free to always send me an email, Robin, skygu@microsoft.com if you're not getting the response. Or if it's a high priority one, just send me an email and I'll send it to the right person and loop you in. Steven asked a question, can you please follow up with the Ajax control toolkit and compatibility with Medium Trust? Interesting. Send me an email, Steven, and I will hook you up with a guy who manages the Ajax control toolkit, and we can drill into that more. Avi asked a question, will VB6 be supported on Windows 8? Yep, You can continue to use EB6 and build the apps you have today, and they'll continue to run on the Windows 8 desktop. Let's see. A couple of questions. Logan asked question, will Metro Apps projects be able to support OData? I believe so. I don't know specifically on that library, but I believe you should be able to access OData services from within Windows 8 Metro-style apps. Robert asked the question, what's the next step for the TFS preview site? Will it be affordable for individuals, or will it be aimed at enterprises? For people that don't know, one of the things we announced at Windows 8, at the Build conference last month was a new service that we call the TFS Services, Team Foundation Services. It's hosted on Azure, and it's a cloud-based kind of service for standing up new TFS projects. And the beauty is you can go up to the site and kind of in under 2 minutes sign up and have a new TFS project created. You can use it for source control, bugs, work item tracking, Agile Scrum management, and all those kind of capabilities. And over time, you'll see additional support being added too. The question here that Robert asked is, is it going to be priced so that individuals or small teams can use it, or is it going to be priced for kind of a large enterprise? The great thing about it is it will be priced for everyone to use, and so I think you'll find it pretty cost effective, and a lot of cool things coming out with that. Matt asked the question: any plans for SQL Azure to synchronize more regularly than 1 time per hour? Can you do continuous synchronization like point-to-point replication? I think the new data sync capability allows you to sync pretty real time. But if you send me mail, Matt, skygo@microsoft.com, I'll loop you in with the team, and we can find out for sure for you and get the details. Shoot, I have 1 minute left. Kabir asked the question, what are your thoughts on shipping parts of ASP.NET as open source libraries like NBC or even closed source and making it available? In general, I'd say with open source and we're trying to be kind of as, I'm trying to move people kind of as fast as possible to kind of support open source more, both in terms of shipping open source libraries with our projects. So we now ship jQuery, we're adding Knockout support, we're adding jQuery mobile support, we added Modernizer support. There's a bunch of libraries that jQuery UI and a bunch of others that we're now shipping with Visual Studio and with ASP.NET. We're also looking to kind of contribute, like the Orchard project and others, directly to open source. And I think NuGet in particular, both from getting open source libraries, but also in terms of allowing others to contribute code and patches to it. That is something that we're trying to promote and push pretty heavily. And so for Beer's question of, are we going to continue doing more? I think the answer is yes, and you'll see more announcements around that in the future. And it's a journey, and I don't think the journey ever quite ends. But every few months we kind of take another important step on that journey. Unfortunately, I think we're actually over time. I'm going to answer one last question, which is, Cyber's question, is it possible that Microsoft will be more open about platform roadmaps for stuff that's already in market? And specifically, how do we get a little bit crisper about our roadmaps and, concern over, hey, is this feature dead or that feature dead? How can we get there? It's good feedback. I think, in general, hopefully we're going to try to be a little bit more transparent around the roadmaps going forward in the future. Certainly in the Azure space, you'll hear more details around that soon. There are some big things, kind of platform shifts that we're making with, for example, Windows 8, and the move to ARM, the move to kind of Metro-style apps using any language or any technology, and then also some of the cloud work that we're doing. And so sometimes we need to kind of get some of our internal ducks aligned in terms of being able to tell the story around kind of the end-to-end experience before we can get super crisp on things. I know that does cause sometimes confusion. It's mostly so that we can tell the end-to-end story so that people understand the story sometimes. And we're doing that, for example, right now with Azure. There's a bunch of, pretty great changes we're making with Azure that we'll talk about shortly. But we kind of want to make sure that we kind of are far enough along as we kind of bring out these new features, so when we bring them out, people understand them and go, wow, now I totally understand how I'm going to take advantage of this capability. But I think you will see our roadmaps hopefully continue to get even crisper in the future. And hopefully chats like this, and this has been great. I'm going to try to do these every 2 or 3 months. Also provide an opportunity to ask questions and get a better sense in terms of where we're going. So I want to thank everyone for coming for the last 90 minutes. Hope you got some stuff out of there. There's still a few questions that unfortunately I didn't get to, but I hopefully answered, I don't know, at least 100 or 200 of them based on this list. Again, I'll do more chats in the future. I will be kicking up more blogging in the future as well, and look forward to chatting more and talking more going forward. So thanks a bunch for having me.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was amazing. That was awesome, and I think you did a great job of talking for 90 minutes nonstop, so you might want to get a drink of water or something. But we really, really appreciate this. This was the 9th time we had you over here, and I'm looking forward for the next one because it seems there are questions and more questions. So really thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. We are going to have another event in November 17 with Shai Friedman, just like this slide was here earlier. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at info@lidnug.org and check our page and Twitter and Facebook. All of this information is here. And thank you for attending this, and have a good day. See you later. Bye-bye.